Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. So we're here today to talk about the Canon EOS R5. So I just wanted to give you a quick background on what my role is as a content creator. So I'm based out of Sydney, Australia, and I am a full-time content creator. So I work for a number of different brands, including Bundaberg Rum, IKEA, Monster Energy Drink, Jaybird, Cold Power, and I've shot a little bit of B-roll for Red Bull content in Japan. What was I looking for in a camera? I was looking for a camera that shot 10-bit video at 4K at 100 frames a second. I was also looking for a great hybrid camera and something that has amazing autofocus. So I have owned a Red Epic Dragon 6K in the past, and that was amazing. Produced a beautiful image, shot in R3D. But a lot of the times I'm a solo shooter. Sometimes I have an assistant, but majority of the time I'm shooting this content by myself. So I was looking for something with really powerful autofocus system with 4K and a high frame rate. And initially this looked like it was an amazing option. It was in a small compact form. It was weather sealed. I could chuck it on a gimbal. But I have experienced some issues with it, and I'd like to mention those a little bit later on. Okay, so I was also looking for decent battery life. So I wanted something that I could go out and shoot with, and I could shoot for about 2 hours without swapping a battery. A lot of the projects that I work on, you're looking at a shooting duration of 2 to 3 hours or less for a lot of the projects that I do. As I'm sure you've already heard on a lot of YouTube videos that are already out there, there is an overheating issue with this camera, and I would also like to address another issue, which would be the codec that it records in. The overheating issue and the codec are both problems for me as a content creator. The 422 10-bit 4K codec that this camera shoots with is H.265. So like pretty much every modern computer on the market, I have one of the fastest MacBook Pros available now. Not even a $15,000 Mac Pro can edit this video with a smooth playback performance without either transcoding or creating proxies. So in terms of quick turnaround, this camera probably is not the best device because you're going to have to be transcoding and creating proxies to even edit and touch the footage. So I've found that highly frustrating. You know, even like I have another older computer, which is a Mac Pro 2013 trash can, and the Red Epic Dragon 6K footage over the R3D files. You know, that this really old computer could crush through that, and it was 6K, no worries. So that is definitely a massive issue with this device. In addition to the heat issue, which I'll mention later on in the video. I've tested this camera so far on 3 paid jobs. On one of the jobs, it overheated on me, which was not ideal. It wasn't the most high stress job out of the jobs that I have used it for, but that was definitely frustrating, and it was a big issue. Okay, so I just wanted to give you my honest opinions on how this device performed when I was actually out in the field shooting with it for paid projects. One of the projects I shot with this, as I mentioned before, was like some commercial content through a marketing agency for Bundaberg Rum. The mixture was, on the brief, it was about 20% video, 80% photo. So this involved switching back and forth between photo and video a decent amount. So we had an assortment of Bundaberg products that were going to be released as like an NRL special for the footy here in Australia, and so quite often I was taking photos of the products, staging products, working with one athlete, and then flicking over to video and getting a few quick video clips, and then flicking back to photo and shooting some more photos. So for the video content, I actually have the EF to RF adapter with a variable ND insert in it, which was really useful. So I have multiple adapters. So I also have the standard straight through adapter. So I was using the straight through adapter to shoot photos with, and then I had the 16 to 35 with the variable ND adapter for video, which is really nice. The variable ND adapter uh, is amazing. It's the adapter has minimal color shift, so when you go to chuck all this footage into Premiere Pro or your favorite editing suite, the amount of color shift is pretty minimal with Canon's variable ND adapter, as opposed to something like a Hoya variable ND adapter. So this guy, you're gonna get a strong like greenish yellowish tint. With the Canon one, it's pretty color neutral. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So going back to how it performed, so during that shoot, I didn't experience any overheating issues. The shoot was about 3 hours long, but what I would like to mention is I had it on photo mode a majority of the time. The rest of it was shot. The video content was 4K 50 and 4K at 100 frames a second, and I didn't experience any overheating issues for this particular job. On another job, when it was 100% video, the camera overheated in about 30 minutes, but we'll talk about that later. So another job that I did with this is wedding. So that was a mix of about 90% photo, 10% video. So the bride requested that I shoot a little bit of video content in addition to the photos that I was shooting. My main objective was to shoot photos, but I captured a little bit of video throughout the day. So in that sort of circumstance, it worked great. I shot with this camera all day. As a photo camera, it performs amazing. Like the electronic EVF, the eye detect autofocus, the burst rate on it's amazing. I think it's around 12 frames a second mechanical and 20 electronic, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But yeah, as a wedding photography camera, this was amazing. I had a few different L series lenses attached to it. Had a 16 to 35 2.8, a 24 to 70 2.8, and a 70 to 200 2.8 with the adapter, and it nailed focus spot on every time. And then when I flicked it over to video, I was shooting mainly 4K 100 in 10-bit color, 422 H.265. So to edit any of that footage, I had to create proxies because my computer wouldn't even play it back without, the playback speed was something like 2 frames a second. So I couldn't even touch it without creating proxies, which is really annoying. But yeah, again, I didn't have any overheating issues. The battery life was amazing, but I was shooting majority photo for that job. So the third job that I would like to run you through is a majority video, which is, I'm sure, like a lot of you people are interested in, how to do with 100% video. So this particular job was for a property developer. I had a house to shoot. I didn't have that long to shoot the house. I had approximately an hour to shoot the house. So I was trying to film everything as quickly as possible. I was shooting in 10-bit color, C-Log, in a BT 2020 color space. I was shooting 4K 50 and 4K 100. And after about 35 minutes on firmware 1.1.2, it actually overheated and shut down. So I still had about 25% of the house to finish after that. So I had to leave it powered off for a little bit. And the time was ticking, and the clients that were in the house had to leave for work, so I had to get the shoot done in a short amount of time. So the pressure was on. Power the camera back on, and I had to shoot 4K 25 for the rest of the time, which wasn't a massive issue, but I had to be a lot more calculated with how I was using the gimbal. I had to move it a lot slower, and I had to make sure that I wasn't like having any bumps in the footage. I was shooting with a 16 to 35 2.8 L series version 2 with an adapter on a Ronin S. But that was a bit frustrating because I wanted to continue shooting 4K 50, but I couldn't do that because the camera overheated. The full HD footage would be an option for that sort of project, but I found the full HD footage to not quite be sharp enough. The way that the footage is downsampled in comparison to something like Sony A7 III or Sony A7S3, the full HD footage just isn't quite there. So whatever downsampling process they're using to downsample from an 8K image to a 1080p for this camera isn't really the greatest, unfortunately. Let me just take a quick sip of coffee. We all love coffee, don't we? Oh, that's good. So I'm sure all you guys are trying to make the decision, how does something like this stack up against the Sony A7S III? So I'm sure that's all on everybody's mind. have used that camera as well. I was very curious about it, so I actually hired it for a day, and I might have a full-time potential role coming up with a football club here in Sydney, professional soccer. So I wanted to give this camera a try, and they wanted me to shoot some sample content for them. So I actually hired an A7S3 and just shot some sample content to put together for them quickly. The A7S3, I used it out in the sunshine for over an hour, shooting 4K at 100, 10-bit, 422, and never overheated. It did get hot to the touch, but it did not overheat. So in terms of reliability, if you're trying to, if you're shooting majority video and you're trying to decide between these two devices, I would probably steer you away from the R5, and I would probably suggest getting the Sony A7S3. Another advantage of the Sony A7S3 over the R5 is the capability to record audio while you're shooting high frame rate video. So the Canon R5, actually, when you shoot to high frame rate video, and you're flick up to 100 frames a second or 120 for NTSC, you're not going to have any audio in your video, which is, it is useful if you want to capture some ambient noises, to add some sort of environment noise to the edit. It is useful to have that audio capability. So another thing I'd like to talk about is kind of what I mentioned before, is video codecs. So the R5, as I told you, is absolutely horrible to edit with. So as a content creator, when you have a quick turnaround time, when your client wants to get it the next day or within the week or whatever it may be, and you shoot a bunch of content, if you have to sit there and you have to transcode all this content or create proxies just to touch it, it's going to increase the amount of time it takes to put out an edit. So in comparison to something like a Sony A7S3, the codec that they're using is you have the option to shoot in a 10-bit 420 codec or a 10-bit 422 codec, and I found that both of those codecs in 4K, my MacBook Pro could handle the footage. So I could actually edit through it, I could scrub through it in a timeline, and I didn't even have to turn down the playback resolution. So it did definitely put pressure on my system, like the fans were spinning, but my MacBook Pro, the latest one, it's 2.3, 8 gigs VRAM, 64 gigs RAM, the i7 model. So it handled the Sony footage just fine, but it can't even begin to process, can't even begin to play back the Canon footage. Another thing I would like to mention about the codec is the sizes of the hard drives that you're going to need, or the storage medium that you're going to need. So both when you shoot the content, you're going to need a massive card, like a CF Express 2.0 card. So you're going to need like a pretty high capacity card if you plan on shooting, any interview sort of content, or if the amount of footage that you're going to shoot is more than like something that's short and scripted. So if you're shooting some sort of doco style content, you're going to need a pretty high capacity card if you want to utilize this camera's 4K sensor. So when you compare that to something like a Sony A7S3, when I shot with that for around an hour, I only had an 80 gigabyte card in it, and I only filled up 60 gigabytes of footage. So comparatively, if I were to shoot the same amount of data on the Canon, as just an approximation, it would probably be around like 200 gigabytes or more. So the codec that the Canon is using is bigger, so it's going to require more like storage medium. It's going to require you to get more hard drives, and it's also less efficient. So it's a larger, less efficient codec that's hard to edit. So I think hopefully in firmware 1.2.0, which is supposed to come out this month at some point in time, maybe they'll offer us an XAVCF codec like in the cinema lines, like a C200 Mark II or a C300 Mark II. So I really hope that they do offer additional codecs that are a little bit more efficient, that are easier to edit on the next firmware update. That is to be determined. As far as the 8K goes, I don't really shoot 8K. I could see that there could potentially be some circumstances where I'd want 8K video and 8K RAW. I did test the 8K RAW capabilities of this, but the file sizes were so huge. I didn't really want to store any of the footage because, you know, essentially storage space is money for me. This is what I do for work, so I deleted the files. But the 8K image that does come out of this camera is absolutely beautiful. The file sizes are massive. So I could see that being useful in some circumstances, but for me, I didn't really care about it. Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom with this camera. So do I love this camera? Well, yeah, the image quality is amazing. The eye detect autofocus is great. So when the camera is not overheating, it's absolutely amazing. The image that comes out of it's beautiful. Um, it I could see it being like a good B cam for like a larger setup. Like if you plan on purchasing the Canon C70, or if you want to get a C200 and then use this as a B cam for maybe a second angle for an interview. This could be a good option. Or if you want to use this as your camera that you chuck on a gimbal and get a few quick B-roll shots, and you're using it in conjunction with somebody else, if you just want to use this for video. I mean, for photographers, this is an amazing tool. If you never shoot any video and you just want to use it for photos, the 45.1 megapixel stills coming out of this are absolutely amazing. You can crop in as much as you can crop in to that 8K image anywhere in that window, and still retain amazing quality. I shot with this camera for photography at about 2000 ISO in multiple circumstances during the wedding I shot, and the grain, it was minimal and it was usable at about 2000 ISO. So for a high megapixel sensor, it actually does decently well in low light. I'm not going to say it's an amazing low light camera, but for photos running at 2000 ISO, that's probably about the highest I go, but it's relatively safe for that. As far as being a good B camera, it's the beauty of this camera is it's easy to mount on a gimbal. So if you want to get those really amazing shots in 100 frames a second, 10-bit color in log, when you have the camera on a gimbal and you're punching in on the subject and you're doing those really creative like rotational shots around the subject, like to use this camera as a creative tool for something like that, it's absolutely amazing. So if you are shooting content and you have a plan going into it, and you have a very limited shot list, and you're going to get all your shots done in less than an hour, and you're careful about powering the camera off in between shots, then this camera could be a good option. The image that comes out of it's amazing. But if it just really depends on how you're using it. If you want to use this as a majority video and you want to shoot a bunch of doco content with this and shoot as much frame rate as you want, probably not the tool to go with. I'd probably suggest going with the A7S III if you want to shoot tons and tons of high frame rate video. You can kind of get away with this as a doco tool if you want to use an external recorder. So I do have a Ninja Inferno, and I've actually tested this camera just to see how long it would record 4K 50 and 4K HQ, and I got approximately 2 to 3 hours out of it before it overheated. So that was recording externally to ProRes. So I mean, potentially that is an option, but again, looking at it in terms of like how efficient it would be to store all of this data. So if you're shooting ProRes HQ or ProRes Quad 4, the codec, although it's uncompressed, is going to require a massive amount of storage space. So it'd probably be not the best tool to shoot docos on. For something like that, you're going to want to go with the codec that's a little bit more efficient, that's high quality, easy to edit, and it's not big on the amount of storage space required for it. The variable ND adapter for the EF to RF it's great. It's amazing. As I kind of mentioned before, the color shift is minimal. It's really easy to use. You can put any lens on it. So if you have a fisheye that is really hard to mount, like a ND filter on it or a filter, there's no issues with that. So you just because the filter actually sits between the lens and the body. So as you can see, there's a little plus minus icon here. And the lens is here, and this is your adapter, so it actually sits between. So if you want to chuck some crazy sort of fisheye on it, that is definitely really easy to do, and you can still maintain your 180 degree shutter speed, in bright circumstances when you're shooting outside. So I really enjoyed using the variable ND adapter on it. Makes it really easy to use as a hybrid device. So I would say, in conclusion, if you're mainly a video person, go with the Sony A7S III. And that's because of the reliability, so you're not going to get overheating issues. More efficient codec. It's easier to edit. It takes less amount of storage space. The color science is actually pretty amazing. It's updated from previous models, so from the A7S II, the colors are going to be more a little bit warmer, a little bit more magenta. And the beauty of this camera as well, the A7S III, is its audio recording options. So you can stick a KTM3 unit on it and actually use XLR mics on it. Where the Canon, unfortunately, it doesn't have an XLR input. It just has a mini jack input. So its audio recording functions are limited. Alright guys, so lots happened since I originally filmed that video. So I no longer have the Canon EOS R5. I ended up selling it for the Sony A7S III because I did end up taking a full-time role in professional sport. The reason why I did that was I'm trying to save up for a house and get everything rolling, so I took a step back as a freelance content creator, and I needed a camera that I could really work with quickly, and the Canon R5 was not the solution for the job I took. So the Sony A7S III, sold the Canon R5, and then picked up the A7S III. So I've really been enjoying the S-Cinetone color science for quick turnaround. For the projects where I have a bit more time, I usually film with S-Log3, S-Gamut 3 Cine, and then use a Leeming LUT. So that's kind of my workflow and process now. If you have any questions about the equipment I use, or about my role as a content creator, or how to become a content creator, feel free to drop a comment. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Yeah, this is my second camera review. I'm just trying to get it out there. I've just been really busy working. Like, I've been working about 6 days a week, sometimes 50, 60 hours a week, so it doesn't really give me a whole lot of spare time to put these videos together. If you want to see more of these videos, definitely let me know. And yeah, I hope to see you guys on another episode soon. We'll be talking about the next review we'll have is a review of the Sony A7S III, just the A7S III. It's an absolutely fabulous camera, and I've absolutely enjoyed using it in the field that I'm in. So see you guys until next time.